House Bill 64 by Representative Cruz relative to an increase in hours for minors receiving a recreation or meal period.
Hey members, I'd like to introduce an amendment on this. This would increase the hours that a minor can work without a required rest break. Doesn't mean they don't get them, from the present 5 hours to 6.5. And I chose 6.5 in this amendment because that's an absolute minimum that we can cover a shift in most fast food establishments and whatnot, service industry. So it could happen that the employer would hire and a minor could work for 6 hours and then take the last 30 minutes off because they don't get paid anyway. So I think this is a good compromise to at least get some more job availability for minors. And it's amendment set 2454.
Yeah, we're on the amendment, members. There are no questions on the amendment. Is there any objection to the adoption of the amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. For a question on the bill, Representative Jackson.
I know we never came to agreement on this bill, so I didn't realize it was coming up. What are you moving the hours to?
I'm moving it to 6.5. So the worst case, a minor could work for 6 hours and then have the last 30 minutes off.
And what was it before?
It was 5. 5 hours with a 30-minute break in there.
So they could work for 6 hours now and have the last hour off?
Last 30 minutes. It has to, within a 6.5 hour period, you have to have one 30-minute break. So worst case, an employer could work them for 6 hours and then they'd have 30 minutes off.
So that's just kind of usurping the law.
It's kind of do what?
Usurping the law, so you're
No,
still
they
going to
can-
make them work a straight 6, and then on their last 30 minutes, you're going to give them a break, and then they can go home after
You
that.
can do that now. You can, for 5 hours, you can work them 4.5 and they leave the last 30 minutes. I'm just trying to make it cover a shift, a whole shift in the food service industry.
What's a shift in the food services?
6 hours is the shortest one.
Okay, yeah.
Some are 7 and 8.
I know
but
we were
6 is
trying
the
to work
shortest.
on something, but since I'm going to have the same objection that, you know what I said last time, that it's more important for children to be in school and prepare for school, and that if an employer wants to hire a student, they should understand that they're a student.
And just to remind everybody, this requires a parental authorization. There are also restrictions on working the night before school and how many hours. There are a ton of
Right, and
regulations.
we debated it last time that some of the students in our school systems are not as fortunate to have attentive parents who are attentive to their education, and that if you remember, did you know that the labor laws, this was originally passed well before now federally, and also the states adopted it at some point to protect the children.
I understand. Thank you.
Members, I'll remind you we're on the 5-minute rule still. For a question, Representative Gary Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sorry about that. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Thank you. Sorry about that. Representative Cruz, this is the legislation that allow employers to work minors longer hours before giving them a break.
Ostensibly, but that's not typically what happens.
But that's what this legislation is aimed at, to allow employers to be able to work minors longer without giving them a break.
In
Correct?
those cases where they can't provide them a break earlier, this would cover that.
I'm concerned about this because we're talking about our minors, and they're young, they're under 18, and I want to make sure that what we do with our minors set them up for a glorious future. I'm wondering if you would accept an amendment. If I offered an amendment that said that if any employer, regardless if any employer, were you willing to accept the amendment that those employers must pay little girls the same amount that they pay little boys?
I don't know of any restriction on that right now.
So you'll be willing to accept an amendment that would allow that will require the employers to pay little girls the exact same thing that they pay little boys. Would you agree to that amendment?
Are you talking 15 to 17-year-olds?
I'm talking boys and girls, yes.
Okay, so teenagers, young adults, is that what we're talking about?
Your bill applies to minors. So
Yeah,
all the
15 to
minors
17
covered by your bill, I want to know whether or not you would accept an amendment that would require those employers to pay little girls and little boys equally.
I would not accept an amendment to change the pay from 15 to 17-year-olds from what it is currently.
But to require that, regardless of what the pay is, that employers pay little girls and little boys the same. Are you willing to accept that simple little amendment that said that?
I think I'm missing this because I'm understanding 15 to 17-year-olds. Are you thinking about a different?
No, not
age
at all.
range?
I'm saying the minors referenced in your bill, just an amendment that say anyone affected by this bill, that an employer must pay little girls and little boys equally. That's all it says.
Well, this is addressing 15 to 17-year-old
Well,
minors.
15 and 17-year-olds, that employers must pay them equally, little girls and little boys, yes.
I'm sorry, 15 to 17-year-olds? No, I don't see a purpose for that. This bill is aimed to give opportunity, not.
So you won't accept an amendment that says that employers must pay little girls and little boys equally?
No, I think the terminology itself is a little bit distracting.
It's not. So we can make this as simple as possible. I just want a simple amendment that said any minors affected by this legislation, that those employers must pay those minors equally, whether or not they're a little girl or a little boy. Your 5 minutes are not up. I want an answer to this. There's no running out the clock filibuster
I don't
here.
believe there's any need for an amendment here. The bill can stand on its own.
So you refuse to accept an amendment that says employers must pay little girls and little boys equally?
I don't think there's a need for that, Representative Carter.
Mr. Speaker, I would like the time to go get an amendment quickly before we run this bill, if I can.
The gentleman is out of time.
Thank you.
Members, there are 4 more questions in the queue, and the gentleman is out of time. And we have amendments. Let's go ahead with the amendments, Madam Clerk.
Representative Ivy has an amendment set 2224 on your computers.
Representative Ivy, on your amendment.
Thank you, members. This is obviously a sensitive issue in that we're dealing with our children. I do believe I have an amendment that should be able to work for everyone. In the amendment, I undo the previously adopted amendment, and I actually strip out all of the changes that the bill makes, and I add one in amendment number 7. It adds the real meat or the substance, and it says that a minor may elect to forego a recreation or meal period if his parents have provided written consent for the minor to do so to the minor's employer. So this would give the ability for a minor to, at their own discretion.
Mr. Ivy, I'm sorry, I was just given a new set, 2770. Is that the one you wanted to? So we're going to withdraw 2224.
Correct. The only change between the old set and the new set is that I repeal the previously adopted set of amendments. So again, what this does is it allows an individual, a teenager, to decide if they want to forego their break, but only after their parent has provided written consent to the employer that they can do so. I don't believe it's right to have a child work 8 hours without being able to take a break. You can have a kid with a medical need, diabetic and other issues where they just need to take breaks. And so I believe this does clear it up because I think a 15, 18-year-old kid, if they want to forego a 15, 30-minute break, they can, but as long as their parents have given approval to do so. And I'll take any questions.
There are no questions on the amendment. Is there any objection to the adoption of the amendment? Representative Cruz.
Is there objection?
Representative Cruz, on your objection.
Members, I just think this complicates things. I'm just trying to make a simple change here so teenagers can get employment, and if you have more restrictions, more forms, already the parent has to approve this. It's not rocket science here. We're just dealing with getting people in DECA clubs or whatever to be able to get out there and get employment. And 6.5 hours was the lowest amount of time I could do to actually make some kind of a difference. So that's what I'm proposing. So,
Representative Ivy, to close on your amendment.
Thank you. I think the thing I did agree with Representative Cruz is that it's not rocket science. These are minors, And the issue is not a statewide issue. If there may be local businesses in rural communities where you don't have a lot of labor available, the labor supply may be very low. But in East Baton Rouge Parish and other areas, this is not an issue. Teenagers there's plenty of opportunity to get work and still accommodate for these needs. So this amendment makes it permissive, but with parental consent. Thank you.
Representative Ivy has offered an amendment to which Representative Cruz has objected. When the clerk opens the machines, all those in favor of the amendment vote yes. Those opposed vote no. The clerk will open the machine. Vote your machines, members. Representative Lance Harris, no. Representative Mack, no. Representative Miguez, no. Representative Muscarella, no. Representative Talbot, no. Representative Hilferty, no. Representative Seba, no. Representative Bagnaris, yes. Representative Abramson, yes. Are you through voting? Clerk will close the machine. Representative Simon, no. 37 yeas, 50 nays, and the amendment fails to be adopted. Next amendment, Madam Clerk.
Representative Terry Landry has a two-page set of amendments, numbers 2769.
Representative Landry, on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I bring this amendment 2769, basically say we pay children no less than changing the minimum wage for children to $8.50 an hour. We want to do something for the children. Let's do something for the children. Mr. Speaker, somebody's waving. I don't
Representative Bacala, why do you rise?
Mr. Speaker, is this germane to the bill?
Just a second. Representative Bacala, the bill in its original state dealt with work hours for minors. This also pertains to minors, but it establishes a rate of pay, so it is not germane. Not germane.
Thanks for taking care of the children.
Next amendment, Madam Clerk. There are no other amendments. Representative Cruz, there are no other questions. You have the right to close.
Members, this is clearly just a bill, whether or not you support teenagers getting jobs. That's the thing. We had a good intention originally, protect teenagers from excessive work or whatever, but the problem is it eliminates work altogether for them. So I'm trying to give some possibility for these minors to get jobs in certain industries that are most likely to get and fulfill the requirements for DECA and ProStart. So this is just a step, hopefully, in that direction. I've minimized the requirement just as small as possible to make it acceptable to employers. Once again, the parents have the option to say no. So I think this is really a parent bill to help the teenagers out. So I'm hoping you can support it. Thank you.
Members, we have questions about people lighting up for the floor in the bill. As we are attempting to close the bill and do amendments, people are lighting up for the floor. If you want the floor on the bill, you need to press your button earlier in the process to be recognized for the floor. We can't do this while we're trying to close on the bill and entertain amendments and people are lighting up at the last minute. There are no questions on the bill. We hit the 5-minute rule a long time ago. Representative Smith, why do you rise?
I'm questioning your statement about no questions. My light was pushed on questions before you told him to close, and you did not recognize my light for a question. And you said there were no questions, but there were lights for questions.
When I called the 5-minute rule after Representative Carter finished, I said there were 4 other questions, but that he was out of time. Those questions go away when he ran out of time on the 5-minute rule. That's why we reminded everybody of the rules when we started. Regardless of who's in the queue, 5-minute rule applies.
All right, but I did push my button to go to the floor even before you told him to close. I did. Thank you.
I'm sorry I didn't see that, if that was the case. He is closed on the bill. There's been a request for a lockout. Would 20 members join in a request for a lockout? When the machine's open, request for lockout members, a lockout is obvious. Quorum call members, vote your machine and only your machine. Quorum call members. Representative Talbot is here, Representative Seaby is here, Representative Mack is here, Representative Simon is here, Representative White is here. Are you through voting? Clerk will close the machine. 83 members present and a quorum. Representative Cruz moves final passage of the bills. Many in favor of final passage vote yes. Those opposed vote no. The clerk will open the machine. Vote your machines, members. Representative Mack, yes. Representative Seaby, yes. Are you through voting? Representative Simon. Talbot, yes. Is Simon yes? Is he a yes? Representative Simon is a yes. Representative Seaby, yes. Clerk will close the machine. 34 yeas, 50 nays. The bill fails to pass. Representative Ivey moves to reconsider the vote by which the bill failed to pass and lay that motion on the table. Without objection, so ordered.